What is up, YouTube? Welcome back to the Nasty Nate channel. Today we are here to talk about one thing with the Durakon build, and that is money. We've had a lot of you guys ask about how much it costs to build a Duramax Swapped Suburban or Yukon, and to be completely honest, I have a number in my head. I'll kind of say that at the end of the video. I think it's gonna be kind of fun to put together the exact cost breakdown of everything. It's actually a lot more simple than what a lot of people think. So it's really straightforward, so let's get into it. Now, before we get into this video, I do wanna say right now that this swap I tried to keep as minimal as possible just because I've never done an engine swap. It's nothing crazy. There's not a whole lot of new parts on this build other than the things that I needed. This build was to show you guys that you can do this in your garage right here as you're seeing. If you've watched the videos, I literally did this entire thing in my garage, and I want to show you that it can be done for relatively cheap and you can have fun doing it, so stay tuned. So obviously the first cost that you're gonna run into is finding the Yukon or the Suburban. $2,500. With an LBZ swap, you wanna get an 03 to 07 Suburban. All the wiring is compatible. Anyway, for the LBZ swapped Yukon that we did, I drove down to North Carolina to try to find a really clean Suburban. And I showed up, I found a really good deal on Marketplace. All of them were going for, you know, upwards of 7 to 8 grand for a pretty decent one. I looked at some around me and I found this one for 4,500 bucks in North Carolina. Messaged the guy and I'm like, yo, I'll be down there this weekend, and as long as you are confident it will make it back to Ohio, I wanna buy it. So I went down there to North Carolina, bought the Yukon for $4,500. So, first initial cost is the Yukon, and I'm like, you know, it'll be a perfect daily for a little while, and it was. I drove it for a couple months through the winter. It wasn't the cleanest vehicle to start with, but I wanted something cheap to basically figure out if I could do this. Anyway, bought the Suburban for $4,500. The second cost, you obviously need to find a donor vehicle or a whole dropout drivetrain, which it's way better to have the donor vehicle. If you're gonna do this, I suggest having the donor vehicle the entire time, which I made a huge mistake on getting rid of the cab before I figured out I needed a few things off of the cab. Anyway, I bought a wrecked Duramax for $4,000. Wrecked LBZ with just over 200 on it, and it was running and driving. It ran fine. It drove in four-wheel drive. The rear axle was messed up and the rear drive shaft was messed up. Also the transfer case. So that was some cost that I knew I was gonna have to go through that during the process, but all in all, I think the truck that I bought was worth $4 grand at least. So there's my initial cost, 8,500 bucks, and you're not even in it yet. A couple other things I had to consider when I bought the wrecked Duramax truck. It needed a rear axle and a transfer case. Right off the bat, I spent $4 grand on a truck that, you know, still needed some parts. So I spent $700 on the rear end. Rear axle I bought from a buddy that I knew. And the transfer case I had to get rebuilt, and I had the pump rub kit installed, which I spent $400, I believe. So right there is another $1,100 off the bat before I even, you know, tore into everything. Now that's something I didn't buy right away, but it is something that I wanted to put on the Yukon. Now, some would say you don't really need to swap the axles, but I really wanted the full Duramax drivetrain, so that's why I did it. on YouTube for you guys. Anyway, that's why I did the axles. You can get away with not doing axles though. All right guys, one of the first things I ordered was body mount spacers. That was 50 bucks. I knew I was gonna need wiring, wire loom, heat shrink, all that good stuff. That was another 50 bucks. I needed a DSP-5 switch because the one that was in the truck originally was kind of, the wires were corroded and frayed and stuff, and I wanted to replace that. That was another 50 bucks. Since I scrapped the cab of my truck before knowing that I needed this, I needed the shift cable from the lever inside of the Suburban to the trans. They are different from a 4L80 to an Allison. You can replace it halfway through, so you don't need the full cable, but I don't think you can buy the half pieces. So I had to buy a full cable, which was 100 bucks. I chose to do the fuel system with an AirDog 165 and a sump setup. Absolutely the easiest fuel setup you can do on one of these. You can make other things work and run the factory sending unit out of the truck and modify the fuel lines and stuff like that. I did not want to go that route. I wanted to be reliable and easy. Fuel system was $1,000, an extra $1,000 on top of everything. So if you are trying to go the cheap route, maybe you don't do a lift pump, but if you're going to do any modifications, you're probably going to need one. A few random things I needed during the swap because I either didn't save the parts or they were bad to begin with. You're going to run into that. So I'm going to throw these in to make it as accurate as possible because there's no way you're going to do a swap for free. So you are going to run into some costs. I had to order T-bolt clamps for the intercooler pipes and an injector return line. That was another 90 bucks. I needed a transmission line cooler clip and a lower radiator O-ring. Another 25 bucks. I needed the hot side lower intercooler boot, 80 bucks, and a lower radiator hose clip was another 8 bucks. So that was 100 total. I also needed longer body bolts with the spacers. I believe that was around 50 bucks for all the body bolts. I needed extra fuel line for the filler neck and some fuel line for the vent hoses. That was another 50 bucks. The Yukon that I bought needed a fuel sending unit because it was so rusty. When I went to take it off, it was starting to break, so I wanted to replace that. Did some shopping at Rock Auto, got that for $165. Oh, on top of the fuel line, I needed the filler neck, the metal piece that actually goes into the bedside, because the truck was sideswiped and the bedside was completely gone. So I needed that piece, and I got a diesel only fuel cap. That was another $78, so I'm gonna type in 80. When I took apart the donor vehicle, I realized one of the motor mounts was getting to be pretty dry rotted and almost fell apart. So I ordered new motor mounts. That was 60 bucks. I also put 2 brand new batteries in it from Walmart. Those were 80 bucks a piece. I needed a clutch fan pulley. That was about 50 bucks. As I told you, I scrapped the cab and didn't have it while I was doing the swap. Totally bad idea. I had to go to the junkyard and cut some connectors out of similar year trucks just to get the connectors that I needed, or the pins that I needed for the wiring. So I think I spent like 20 bucks at the junkyard. Just something to think about. So aside from the Yukon and the Duramax donor, we have a grand total of $2,100. So let's add everything up. All right, I do want to add about, I'd say probably $200 in fluids. So that includes diff fluid, ATF, oil, coolant. You know, that stuff is not cheap, and that's definitely something you have to account for when you're doing a swap like this. So let's add everything up right now. I haven't seen the price. I'm gonna display it across the screen, and I guess you'll get my reaction firsthand. All right, guys, total cost of the Yukon right here. 11,900 bucks. Honestly, that's not bad. You want to know what my guess was? My guess was between 11,000 and 12,000 bucks. So, guys, I'm putting this video together right now, and I forgot one of the most important things. We left off at 11,900. I forgot the drive shaft. It was like one of the most important things, the last thing I needed to get this thing driving. So that was around 150 bucks, and I needed front U-joints because I wanted to just make the drive lines, you know, perfect before they went back in the truck. And that was around 50 bucks, I believe. So $200 more. So we can add that into the 11,900. Let me do this. And that gives us $12,100. So still really close to the range that I kind of expected to build this in. I'm not sweating it. 12 grand on a LBZ, Duraburb, Durakon, whatever you want to call it, just makes me excited. Hopefully you guys enjoyed this video. Stay tuned to more. We got big plans coming up, so subscribe down below. It's just too funny hearing that in a Yukon, but I love it.